I'm Hanish Patel, and this is User Friendly, the show where we explore emerging trends in tech, media, and telecom, and how they impact business, operations, and the world around you. Today, digital reality is not just a futuristic technology, it's here and now, and it's here to stay. Businesses are applying digital reality in all its forms: augmented, virtual, mixed, 360 video, and immersive experiences in the real world. We're seeing some really exciting and practical uses, from field service to industrial sales to consumer retail to technical training and much more. Here today is Alan Cook, Managing Director for Deloitte's Digital Reality Practice, alongside Omar Khan and Daniel Diaz with Magic Leap, a company known for its lightweight wearables that offer the power of a processing computer with the weight of a pair of headphones. We're going to dive into the work that the company is doing to bring augmented reality and spatial computing to the enterprise. Alan, Omar, Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I got a chance and I was fortunate enough to try out your Magic Leap headset, and I'm still blown away. So this is a kid in a candy shop to have you guys here. So let's just get straight into it before I geek out on it, right? The global market for AR is predicted to reach approximately 149 billion by 2025, fueled in part by the growth of 5G and faster, more reliable computing power. Why is augmented reality on fire, so to speak? And why is it important for companies to take notice of and take steps to embrace it today?
Sure. I mean, it's a good statistic, 149 billion by 2025. I think Omar and I were going through a bunch of industry research and looking at what the true impact of this was going to be. And we actually calculated something like $79 trillion worth of GDP will be affected by spatial computing in the next 10 years. It's massive. It's every company and it's every facet of that company. And so what we're starting to see now is companies waking up and realizing that, much like they did when the web first came to be, or mobile, or social, or IoT, much like digital transformation, which I think we're starting to see maybe the tail end of, spatial transformation is going to become the conversation that dominates the CTO's office over the next decade. Mm-hmm. And they're starting to realize that this is something they have to prepare for. It's something not a lot of people truly understand. And I think, much like anything else you do in business, they need to start to look at the challenges they're facing and then think about how something like spatial can address that. And that's coming to bear right now.
And Daniel, just quickly before we jump in there, how best can we define spatial for our listeners?
I think there's a lot of confusion around that right now. Uh-huh. I think people sort of conflate, especially on the consumer side, VR, MR, AR. Spatial computing, I think, is if you look at it as sort of strata, as the fidelity and sort of the intelligence of the content is probably the highest level, meaning that it is content that is aware of the physical world around it. It is not simply content that is overlaid on the digital world and content that you can't interact with. It is intelligent content that understands you, your place in the world physically, what's around it, and you're able to interact with it in a way that's significant and meaningful and delivers a whole lot of value to you.
And I think I got a real world example of that just when I tried on the headset, where that gaming one that I was talking to Omar was just, again, it was aware of the furniture in the room, right? And I think that for me really brought it home that that's a totally different experience from what I'm used to seeing elsewhere.
Sure. And then think about that. I mean, so gaming is a great example of a great use case, but think about that in terms of a healthcare environment, being able to understand the patient, their physical location in the room, what position their limbs are in, and able to track that, thinking about that in a warehouse or a factory floor or manufacturing plant. That ability for digital content to be aware of the world around it and interact with that and allowing you to interact with that in a way that's real, contextual, timely, that is the real power of spatial. That's why I think companies are waking up and getting so excited about it.
And I think there's an opportunity also for in spatial computing for that content to gain context over time because it's persistent. Right. And so as people interact with that content, it gains that context of that interaction, becomes more and more valuable over time.
Wow. Help me understand that a bit more. I mean, I get the fact that it's learning and we're hearing about AI concepts, learning more about what's happening, but help to break that down in terms of an example where that could be applied.
Yeah, first, I mean, if you think about all the sensors that are in the environment around us, they don't have the ability to add context to digital experiences today the way they could. So even that smart city example that you were talking about, that smart city example has so many different data layers associated with it. Today, those are locked into a server. Or they're hidden on a screen somewhere, and you got to go to open a website, or you have to go open an application to go see it. Now you've got the digital twin of Los Angeles, which is I think the example you were looking at and had a chance to interact with. That digital twin has the ability for you to interface all those IoT sensors and whether all third-party data that exists from different sources back onto the digital twin. So that digital twin gains context over time, and your interaction with it over time becomes more and more valuable because all of the sensor data is interfaced to it. And once it's interfaced, now you can do true exception-based management, because you can see where things are not appropriate versus where things are appropriate, and you can focus your attention geospatially to where it's required. So you can think about the applications in urban management. Tomorrow I'm going to be on a panel on smart city. And, the next generation cities, as well as cities that are re-instrumenting themselves to become smart cities, are very interested in spatial computing for managing those cities and seeing what's going on from all the different sensory inputs that are going onto that city. So you have truly sentient cities.
So let me ask you a bit more about assistive technologies. And we keep hearing more and more about these things of integrating AR with machine learning, and then you've got voice technology overlaid with that. And as you mentioned, a lot more of the IoT data, to really enable that real-time two-way data exchange, analytics and informed decision-making that comes off the back of that. But how are businesses actually transforming their operations through this bi-directional data sharing and integrating AR with other technologies?
So a lot of these exponential technologies are building on top of each other. We wouldn't be where we were today unless cloud and analytics and AI were enabling a lot of what we're doing on the AR side. IoT is made useful with augmented reality. 5G, the use case that everybody goes to all of the time is augmented reality, because that's going to be one of the first ones which will drive 5G adoption into the marketplace. And yet at the same time, spatial AR, digital reality, needs that to actually become effective both in the enterprise and for consumers at this point.
And then if I think about some of those applications we're just talking about, there's clearly some very defined use cases that people can use in the field versus people can use in the office versus people can use in the home. Which one of those do you feel is going to be first out there that will really be the kind of tipping point for mass adoption, so to speak?
We launched our first product, Magic Leap 1 Creator Edition, August of 2018. And in the last year and a half, we've been spending a lot of time in the field with customers, with enterprise customers across multiple sectors, and even within sectors across different functions within each of those businesses. So, with the training department, with the manufacturing department, with field services. So we've been gathering information and feedback from each of those constituents. And what's happened over that time is the broad set of use cases, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them. It's really, truly endless because, as Daniel mentioned earlier, when we think about the economic impact being $79 trillion, you can think that's every industry, every sector, every function that could be impacted by XR, which is kind of the overarching term we think that we use, extended realities that covers AR, VR, spatial computing, and mixed reality. And so XR has that ability to impact that many different sectors. And we've distilled it down to 4 core use cases that we think are the most impactful. One is co-presence. Imagine us, we're sitting around the same table here, but if we could break the boundaries of time and space, a true Doctor Strange-like moment, right, or a Kingsman-like moment, where you can get the same value of us 4 coming together, sitting around this table, but you being in LA, me being in Miami, you being in New York, and to Alan's happy place, he's like in St. Moritz, skiing in the Alps or something, and or vice versa. You and I can swap spaces, Alan. But getting the same value of being in the same time and place. Co-presence is a key use case, and a lot of our customers have already started to put it into practice. The next one is training and remote assistance. So learning, training, remote assistance. On our panel earlier today, we were talking about the fact it's really not point-in-time training anymore. It's continuous learning. Amin Tufani of the Singularity University said, the worker of the future will be defined by their ability to actively unlearn, which means that we're constantly having to learn, unlearn, learn, unlearn, learn, unlearn. And full utilization for the worker of the future means that we should be able to do 50 different tasks in one day. So this continuous learning environment, being able to access, whether it's through any form of XR, the work instructions I need to perform that task, and then be able to call in a remote expert to help me guide me through a problem that I couldn't have trained for in the classroom, because it only happens with a confluence of events in the real world. So that's the next kind of set of use cases that come together. And then the third one is spatial visualization. So whether it's a 3D model, whether it's just whiteboarding, there's so much value in us coming together and just whiteboarding. Imagine being able to whiteboard and get the same value from it from all over the world, and you get 50 people whiteboarding and getting the same value that you do in a collaborative session in the same conference room. And so spatial visualization is basically taking anything that's today confined to a screen and unlocking into the real world at scale. And the final one is location-based experiences. We see a lot of different use cases come together under that umbrella of location-based experiences. It can be traditional media and entertainment, where you want to take content that you've created traditionally, for the big screen, and actually put it into the world around us. It could be a retail activation. It could be in a museum, bringing an exhibit to life that today we've got to read a small placard about its history, or if you got the audio guide, you're going through an audio guided experience. But what if you just put on a pair of glasses and you saw what that was like 3,000 years ago, and you saw how it evolved over time, how it made its way into that museum, and then whoever the foremost expert is on that artifact, that's the person guiding you through that experience. We have that running today. We're working with museums all over the world. We've done experiences already and that showcase this type of this experience. And so, those are the 4 use cases that we've honed in on as the first generation of experiences that bring the most value, and that companies, both B2B and B2B2C, are ready to adopt and start to transform their businesses.
Brilliant. And, now that you've talked about those 4 use cases, so to speak, I mean, they make solid sense. And then when you think about the technologies and everything else that companies need to put together to deploy AR at scale, what would you say would effectively be the stages of the journey that any enterprise or organization would need to go through?
So a lot of the time over the last few years, it's been the head of innovation who has set up a little tiny pilot. And it's been a cute, shiny thing. What we're finding now is people aren't interested in doing pilots. People are actually interested in doing prototypes, which they're going to turn into industrialized solution sets. And so that's been one of the big kind of shifts over the last year, is moving from this, it being a cute thing, to it being an important thing for the future of our business. And so what we're tending to find, a lot of the time up front, we're doing some strategy engagements, because we have to demonstrate what the value is going to be, what the return of investment is, and where it makes the most sense to do this. I think all of us around the table believe that you can apply spatial digital reality technology throughout the entire organization. You're going to get a bigger bang for your buck sooner in some areas than in others. So those are the ones that you should attack first. And like Omar was saying, we've already identified that immersive learning activities, field services, field engineering, visualization type solution sets, retail, have already proven real return on investments. So those are some of the ones that initially we're recommending that folks look at within their own organizations, depending on what they are. Typically, once you've proven out the pilot and once you've actually done the prototype to actually show that for a small number of people it works, we're then just expanding it. We're doing work with some of the large oil and gas clients right now, where initially we're taking it to the first 15, 20 engineers, and we're learning from it, obviously. And so that as we then move it out, one of the other big lessons we're learning is this isn't just about building a VR, AR, spatial play. This is around building an entire platform. This has to fit into your entire operations for your organization. This has to be that next generation of technology to help you do what you're already doing, but even better.
Right. So to use the words you said of no longer a cute thing and an important thing, and it's not about a pilot, and it's about moving into prototype to then it graduate to ultimately a platform. If you're thinking about achieving that level of success to get it to that platform level of play, I mean, how do companies develop the strong ecosystem that's going to be required, and effectively some of the partnerships that need to be at play that will be essential for that?
Yeah, I think we're looking at it from, it has to be truly foundational, and the investments you have to make are foundational, because if these aren't point solutions. And if you approach it as a point solution, then the scalability isn't there, and the marginal cost of deploying the next experience is equivalent to or more than the first experience, depending on how complex it is and how many more people you need to engage with it. And so the foundational layer is something we call Magicverse, and what that does is, at its core, it takes physical spaces, your offices, your retail stores, your warehouses, your manufacturing facilities, and turns them into dynamic digital twins. So you create a dynamic digital twin, and on that dynamic digital twin, now you have the ability to deploy these experiences. And when you build that foundational layer of mapping and scanning those physical spaces, now you have something that you can deploy multiple experiences for multiple constituents. So if it's a retail store, let's use the retail example that Alan was just talking about earlier. And I've got a big box retail store, I've got a dynamic digital twin. Well, who are the folks that are walking through that on a daily basis? I've got customers, I've got employees, I've got suppliers and partners who are delivering to that retail store, from a delivery perspective. I've got all sorts of different constituents that are coming in and out of that store. And I shouldn't have to have different applications for each of those constituents. Those experiences should be deployed on top of the magicverse of that site. So it could be magicverse.retailer X, it could be magicverse.retailer Y, it could be magicverse.retailer Z. But that's a foundational component. Now, when you have that dynamic digital twin, you can start to interface IoT sensors, inventory information, legacy cloud-based ERP information, so inventory data, customers, CRM data, and you can start to visualize it and make it much more actionable or decision-oriented, as you were talking about earlier. Because now if I can see who just walked into the door, what their buying patterns are, where they're walking in the store, and if I can guide them, more seamlessly to their next purchase, I can now, it's spatial visualization-based data-driven decision-making. It's a mouthful, but if I can visualize in space the data necessary to help me guide me to the next decision, that's incredibly valuable. I don't have to go back to a spreadsheet. I don't have to go back to an interface. And so that foundational layer is really important because now you can start to interface legacy systems to it and new content and information that are coming in via experiences or development.
I think the other thing you have to worry about is just how you communicate about this technology, why you're deploying it, what the value is to the person who's using it. Behavioral change is really hard. New technology is hard for organizations to adopt, and a lot of that is behavioral and just human nature. So I think it's really important for companies to really think through how they're going to communicate it to their employees, why they think this is so valuable, how it's going to help them. Magic Leap, our mission is about amplifying human ability. It's not about replacing human ability, it's about amplifying human ability. And so that's a really important message. If you can help employees understand how they are going to be better at their job, how their job will become easier, how they can begin to pay attention to things that they might have had to ignore before, this becomes a very different prospect than thinking about how is this replacing me. This is not just about how can I get you to do more work. It's about how can you enjoy your job more, how can you do it better, how can you do it safer. That's really important. I think the same is true on the consumer or the consumer side of things. Like, if you want to move this from being something out of the curiosity department or a gimmick, it needs to deliver something of true value, whether that's emotional or actually something in the actual shopping experience or whatever experiences they're going for. You have to make it better somehow, and you have to communicate that really clearly. Those are two things I think that companies, especially on the corporate side, they really need to pay a lot of attention to.
And let's just, if we may, dig into that a bit more. You mentioned one clear challenge in terms of just cultural mindset of the employee, right, in terms of that sort of shift. What other sort of challenges are you seeing come up in the conversations you're having with organizations, or certainly see that will be on the horizon as they look to then employ this in a much more scaled version than they are right now?
Yeah, I think some of the things that come up are, there's a lot of buzzwords out there from a technology perspective that are quite, can be scary for an organization, because you worry about your limited technology investment and your limited next generation technology investment. And as companies look at it, it can be quite intimidating. So whether it's AI, machine learning, IoT, XR, and all the different components of XR, mixed reality, spatial computing, people are looking at it saying, okay, where do I put my investment? How do I invest in the right thing?
Well, and that's what we're dealing with this right now. So some people put in, I think maybe a little too early on the VR side, and we're paying the price for that as they now are a bit more hesitant to sort of jump in on spatial and this next generation of this technology. We're going to have to overcome that. And again, it goes back to demonstrating clear value and communicating that to every enterprise, why this is necessary. This is not a solution in search of a problem. This is a game-changing technology, and we have to make sure they understand that.
And as we look at it, I think the answers that we have for them now, which we didn't a couple of years ago, frankly speaking, and that was part of the announcement that we made with Deloitte, last month, which was the ability for us to have solutions that are truly cross-platform. And because we realize that there's already billions of devices out there in the world today, we need to make sure that those windows and screens are also have a view into the spatial world, into Magic First, we call it. And so the solutions that we're deploying are meant to simplify the investment so that they're truly cross-platform across both platforms and devices. So that if you deploy a spatially optimized learning solution for your manufacturing environment, if somebody doesn't have a Magic Leap device and they have a tablet, can they pick it up? Can they get some percentage of the value of the content that was developed? This is somewhat akin to the fact that the overwhelming majority of video that was created for the big screen is now consumed on a 6-inch mobile device or a 5-inch mobile device. Those devices are, not IMAX screens. They don't have Dolby Atmos sound systems. Yet all of the content was encoded at that level, but most of it is consumed on this sort of continuum down to, a mobile device. And so when we develop content, a learning experience, a training experience, a retail activation, media and entertainment experience, it'll be best consumed and interacted with through a spatial computer like Magic Leap 1. But it doesn't mean we disenfranchise the billions of screens that are out there. Those need to be windows into the Magic First.
So let me ask you guys, as best as you can share, right? What's the absolute best use case you've seen using spatial computing, using this extended reality that we've got today?
We created a 4-letter little cheat sheet that we use, and Omar's smiling because he's probably fairly sick of hearing this at this point. But
no, it validates a lot of the work we've done. So it's always good to see when things triangulate.
Yeah, and it's VICE. V is all about visualization and creating a vision. And so we've talked about this already, about how these technologies really help you see in the way that we see every day.
Right.
And just enhances it. It really does enable that next generation of visualization. Instruction or informing, again, this just goes down to the immersive training idea, which is one that is now probably one of the largest and growing areas for the use cases. And we're selling multi-million-dollar deals in that space right now. Then there's communication and collaboration, and Omar talked about that at great length. I mean, this idea of how can we help to collaborate better, how can we communicate better through time and space using these new technologies. And then the final one is all just around engagement and entertainment. And so what that enables you to do is to capture the consumer's imagination in a brand new way, in a way that hasn't been done before, but also the worker. How can we actually engage our workers in a better way? How can we help them to do their job? As Daniel was saying, it like in a more efficient, how do we enhance that? And within that, I mean, the use cases you're taking off really are the field servicing, the immersive learning, the retail, the spatial, the collaboration type ones. There are some really interesting outliers which are happening there. Well, we've done work with the USGA, allowing you to see the US Open being played in 3D live. And there's a lot of other just really entertaining things, engaging things which are happening, which is surprising as well.
Yeah, I think learning training and remote assistance is one that has garnered the most attention just because of how much value it adds immediately from an enterprise perspective. And with this next generation workforce of millennials, Gen Z, how do you engage them? How do you get them productive immediately? They don't want to spend time in the classroom. They want to learn on the job, and they want to learn on an exception basis because they want to be able to pick up tasks immediately. And then when they run into an obstacle is when they want to be trained. We see that with our kids today. I see that with our kids just want to dive into everything, and they're like, okay, I ran into something. Let me go find this on YouTube and figure out how to solve this. And then they'll come back and they'll keep going, and they'll run into another obstacle. They'll go back to YouTube, and that's the same worker who's coming into the workforce now. That's who we need to engage. That's who we need to get productive. That's who we need to retain. And when we think about that dynamic, spatial computing gives us that ability to be able to, in the environment around us, deploy training, and then also from a sensory input perspective. I think Daniel hit the nail on the head earlier. We are aware of the world around you, and we're aware of you. These sensory inputs that define spatial computing are incredibly valuable because if, let's say Jose on the job has hit an issue and is feeling frustration, this is a time that we can sense and we can slow down the working environment. We can provide augmented work instruction in that space. Let's say they missed one torque of the screw. We can pause the manufacturing line based on object recognizers and sensory inputs that feed into the system that allow us to both do QA but also keep that worker productive and engaged throughout the entire time. And now they can not just be focused on that station, but the next day they can work a completely different station. Now you're keeping that worker engaged in a way that isn't traditionally possible because people become so specialized in the task that they were trained for. They're not as as fungible as from a resource perspective. And so now it makes them feel more productive. They can garner higher wages that way. And so part of us being a human-centered company and technology in the service of humanity, to use one of Daniel's taglines, is also to amplify that worker. And why isn't it possible for each of us to have our own personal AI? AI is not about replacing us. It's about augmenting us. It's about amplifying us. It's about giving us longevity. There's so many people working on longevity of the worker from a health perspective. Now, how do we actually engage that worker on a longer period of time? So as our age expectancies and our life expectancies grows, how can we be an engaged part of the workforce for that same period of time? And so we have that opportunity now.
So one of the things I want to ask is, we talked about a number of use cases here. Just the opportunity you talked about in Vice, I absolutely love that. What would you say is absolutely the most unexpected outcome that you've seen through the use of spatial computing and sensory and everything you've just spoke about just now?
For me, it's when we did the Game of Thrones activation with Warner Media and HBO, it was really incredible. You'd walk them into this physical environment that was meant to replicate the castle in Westeros. And they'd walk into this physical environment. They'd see 3 walls that look like stone and cauldrons that would become lit with fire with spatial computing. At the end of the experience, a portal would open up in the back of the wall, and you would see the Great Wall that would open up, and you'd see the White Walkers beyond it. And you would see rational human beings walking up to the wall and trying to shove their head through a physical wall that they just saw 15 seconds ago because they were so convinced that what they were looking at was real. For me, that's the thing. Over and over again, watching people discover spatial computing and how quickly they immerse themselves into this mixed environment of the digital and physical world, and how quickly they believe that what is around them is true and real. And that is, for me, probably one of the most interesting things is this concept of reality. Reality will no longer be defined by the physical world and what we see that is physically in front of us. It has now become this mix of what is digitally present and what is physically present in front of us. And for me, that's probably going to be one of the most incredible things to watch as we redefine what reality is. And reality is defined or redefined over and over again as digital things enter in our world and become more and more real.
I think one of the biggest aha moments or surprises, when people visit us, our headquarters in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or some of our folks like to call North Miami, we have a slate of kind of hands-on experiences that we take people through. They span both consumer and enterprise experiences, location-based experiences, training experiences, collaborative experiences, and we put people through, depending on how much time they have, slate of experiences built both by Magic Leap as well as mostly by third parties now in our demo center. And when they come out of it, obviously everybody's got a big grin, like you did. You were a kid in a candy store. They're all kids in candy stores. And it doesn't matter what industry they're from. They could be coming from an oil well. They could be coming from a retail environment. They could be coming from Wall Street Bank. Doesn't matter. They all come out with the same reaction, which is like, what if we could do this? What if we could do that? And their brains are immediately going because they see this amazing capability of bringing the digital and physical worlds together and eliminating the intermediation of screens. And they're like, what could this transform this environment? Could I do this? Could I do that? And they're just immediately going. And so our ability to then bring them back and say, okay, let's focus on these n number of use cases. Let's see where we can add the most value, near, mid, far. Let's crawl, walk, run. And there's all we can use any form of metaphor for that. That's the most amazing part, because as soon as you put it on, your brain starts to go. Yeah. And people come up with use cases we haven't even imagined yet. And those are the aha moments that we're seeing, and that's so much fun to go through. Then bringing them back to, okay, what do we do first? What do we do second? What do we do third? What do we do that's foundational? Right. And then we get into the nitty-gritty, and that's where Alan helps us.
But no, I mean, it really is to be able to get your clients to giggle. Right. And to laugh and to just have that childish sense of delight. And that's not just the gaming stuff. That is the immersive training stuff. That is the field servicing, when they realize just the huge potential, as Omar was saying. And you do just see them light up. Yeah. And it's like, we get left out of the conversation because they are now talking in their own language as fast as they possibly can for as many opportunities as they can. And, just that power of creation that this enables is just spectacular.
Yeah, and what you've described literally was myself and a few others when we first tried it on. We came out, I was like reeling off a whole list of things of could do it here, could do it here, could do it here. And I'm sure maybe in that list I've got some in, but I've got to ask you guys for a little bit of an exclusive. I can't let you go. Knowing that all of these things are the art of the possible, right? What's in the pipeline for Magic Leap next? What are we going to see come down as the future of the future? Let's put it that way.
Well, this year for us is really about meaningful deployments in the enterprise. We announced an entire ecosystem of solutions and partners a month ago, of which Deloitte was one of our key partners. And so this year is going to be about really meaningful deployments based on the use cases and the solution areas that we talked about. But I think one of the really cool things that's going to happen this year is Magicverse. And we're going to start to see Magicverse sites light up around the world. And, we've already announced one Magicverse site publicly, and that's the University of Miami, which is the first spatial computing learning destination. And we are in the process of lighting that up. It's already gone live, and now we're starting to kind of enrich it over time. But we're going to see more and more of those. We're going to see, stadiums. We're going to see museums. We're going to see public and private sites. We're going to see enterprises. And it'll be like, seeing the Earth from space, centuries ago. And then, the Industrial Revolution, lighting started to happen. And now you get lights popping up in New York and lights popping up in London. It's going to be the same way. We're going to see Magicverse sites start to come online, and those lights will get brighter and brighter as those Magicverse sites gain experience and context.
So I think the thing I'm most excited about, beyond everything Omar's talked about, the content and the Magicverse growing, is the fact that we are working on the next generation device for Magic Leap, which will launch in 2021. We're working on all the things you would imagine we're working on. Obviously making it smaller, lighter, and more powerful, and all the things that comes with that. So we're very, very excited about that. That'll be launching in 2021.
Fantastic. Thank you for that exclusive. Always try and grab one from someone. And Alan, to you, in terms of just Deloitte's digital reality practice, where do we see that in the next year or two?
Well, we're excited. I mean, this started as a small practice, and now we're generating 8 figures of income for the firm. And just like every exponential technology, it's roughly doubling each year. We have found that over the last 12 months, it's moved from a push of us getting information to the marketplace to a pull as our clients are actually asking us to come to them and already know about the technology. And over the next year, I think that some of the platforms we've been talking about here are just going to continue to help that message get out there and make it easier for people to start adopting and using the technologies.
Yeah, this will be known as the decade of spatial transformation. It'll be very interesting to look 10 years from now, 2030 at CES, and look at what has been accomplished in spatial over the last 10 years.
Fantastic. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Daniel, for just giving us this deep dive into what I like to call the future. And I saw the future when I demoed your equipment. It was phenomenal. But, really looking at augmented reality and its many use cases, and the use cases that the three of you brought to the fore around what the potential is around digital reality and spatial computing. It's here. It's here to stay. And there's a lot more coming down for us all to experience. So I look forward to learning more about it and seeing the developments. And once again, thank you to the three of you for coming on this episode. It's been an honor of mine to have you guys after having that equipment demo, for sure.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to User Friendly. To subscribe or listen to more episodes, search for Deloitte User Friendly in your favorite podcatcher or find us online at userfriendly.deloitte.com. The opinions expressed by guests on this podcast belong to them and do not necessarily reflect those of Deloitte.